Hello everybody and welcome to episode 9, Painting Dark Sword. We're going to focus on a few different things. So I'm going to turn this around. See, we got a big old cloak here. I thought that could be fun. Maybe for some freehand. Actually found another dark sword figure off here to the left. Maybe we can fool around with that pattern, see how that goes. Thought maybe we could do a little, maybe object source lighting on this sword here. Nothing terribly fancy, just a little touch of it. You can see the image in the upper right. It's got some blue there. And this is the Vallejo blue fluorescent. This one's the trickiest out of all the fluorescents. Last episode you saw the magenta and you saw that one just really did amazing things. This you have to play around with it a little bit more to get some juicy effects with this. Then we'll sneak in a little bit of armor here. I think we're going to go more in the probably copper/bronze because we want something that's a little darker because we got this lighter sword here. Obviously there's maybe some metals on the shield over here. Also that design that you see on the right, it reflected this pattern on the shield just a touch. Flesh tone wise, not sure what we're doing on that yet. Maybe a dark tone, maybe light. We'll just see when we get to it. That's the other thing I try to do with these is not necessarily have a super preset plan before we get started. And as usual, what are we using? We've got the number 8 round craft brushes. So again, the new basically unbrutalized brush has a nice sharp point to it, but when they do get a little bit more abused and beat up, you see you can still do something like this with them. So basically turning this into that filbert brush that has your longer, basically reservoir of paint, because usually a filbert brush typically only about that long on the bristles. The longer the bristles, the more paint it's going to hold, just like a liner brush. Now you can get the set of 12, you can see $4.99, not expensive. Comes from Hobby Lobby. You can get them on their website. There's other synthetic brush sets like this too. They aren't necessarily this brand. This is really more just the example, essentially, right here. The palette, basically a palette paper. Basically comes in a little pad so that you can just tear those sheets off when they're done and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just throw it away. We're also going to use a few different paints here. So we've got some secret weapon colors right here. We might even throw in more of the clear paints. Like here we've got the clear yellow, clear red. Could be good for some of the freehand. We've got our off-whites, the usual that you see all the time, the maggot white made in flesh. You don't have to have these specific ones. It's just something along these lines. A lighter color here that's got a little bit of red to it, and a lighter color that's almost tinted a little more towards the blue. And we might throw in this mint green also, again with that fluorescent paint to give it a little more life, because the fluorescent paints are really clear. And of course I'll be using a variety of liner paints. I think I've also got red liner out here. This is the blue and the brown, also from Reaper. These you see all the time, right? They're just those nifty dark pure pigments. So here's that red liner. What we're going to do is throw the paint out on the palette, and we're just going to start to block things in as we usually do. Determine what colors we want maybe on this cloak versus the inside of the cloak. And then next step after that, just be to establish the glow. Not paint it all in, but just initially to get that set instead of painting it on afterwards. That's the big thing that tends to get people, is they paint everything and then it comes time to add the glow and they're just too worried they'll screw up everything they've been painting. If you start out with it, nothing to screw up because it's already there. So we'll get that paint out on the palette and we're going to get this party started. we've got ourselves some paint on the palette now, and we're going to establish our lights and darks. Some of it's going to be with glazing. It's all part of that general term of shaded base coat, because this really is just a base coat. Got a red liner here. This is that blue verdigris, the green verdigris. These two from Secret Weapon. That's the mint green. There's your fluorescent blue. Then we got some more Reaper stuff here. We got the Maiden Flash, our reddish off-white, then clear red, clear yellow. These are both for maybe doing some of that copper armor and also warming up some of that red liner. And we're going to start with that. So we're going to throw that out there. I'm going to mix a little bit of the clear red in it. And as the questions have come up, I just use water. Used to use flow improver and all that other kind of stuff. Just don't bother with it anymore. I'm throwing just a touch of blue here because I'm going to actually try and match that cloak that you see in the lower left-hand image, and we'll just start there, and boom, here you go. So essentially, just took these couple of colors and effectively matched what's over here on this side. So I'm going to brush pointing next to that. Alright. And if I add a little more blue to it, guess what? It makes it a little more opaque. See, we'll just... no fuss, no muss. Now, do I want the outside cloak to be the same? Maybe, maybe not. But what we're going to do is just get some of that in here. Not worrying about that hitting the other surfaces, because guess what? Probably has to reflect there if it's going to be metal. And you know what? I'm just going to hit this the same way. And let's say you want to do some wet blending. Well, by mixing your own color, it makes it a little bit easier to do wet blending. Plus, you've got the bigger brushes. So all I'm doing is just taking that same brush, painting that over the top. And we'll let that sit there and dry for a second. I'm going to grab my 2x2 hands of blue gloves here so that you're not getting quite the reflection off of my skin color. So I was just shoveling snow. There we go. That's a little better, a little less reflections. So see how that's darkened that down real quick. Well, let's see what happens when we grab a little bit of this clear yellow here. Mix that up. Oh, in there. I'm just going to throw this out there. Who knows? I may change this up completely and go with some more silvery type armor. But if we're doing a bluish glow, I'm thinking maybe you want a gold armor. You can go with something like that. You have to have some kind of contrast. Now maybe your character is wearing shiny silver armor, whatever, and you say, well, I still want my glowing blue sword. Maybe there's other ways to you give it, maybe you create a little different environment where something else is reflecting on the armor, so there's just, again, something for that to play against. So see, all I'm trying to do here is take a little more of that yellow. We're just trying to figure out what colors are going where. Just trying to determine a color scheme. And now, as I work my way down here towards the ground, just going to throw a little bit of that on the ground there. I'm going to take some green. It's almost going to make that sort of a grayish color there. Again, not worried about lines or anything like that. Just trying to figure out what we want. So we're pretty much at the stage we got to decide what's going on with this cloak. If I make it a white cloak, you're not going to get a whole lot of glow from that. What if we made the inside of that maybe a dark bluish green, something along those lines? Well, we got blue liner here. Let's throw a touch of that out onto the palette. Poof, right here. Let's say. And next touch of our verdigris blue with it. And inside the cloak we go. Just like that. This is what I like about the craft brushes here. Is what I'm going to do is just shoving that brush down into that crevice there. Just really pushing it down in that crevice. So this way I don't have to worry damaging the brush or anything like that, because it's not a super fancy brush. Costs 30 some odd cents, depending on sales tax where you live. And all I can do, even now, even at this stage, let's grab some of the brown liner here. And remember, I talk about context all the time. So if I have this mid-tone here, it kind of looks light. It's basically barely a mid-tone. I got to get rid of that. It's eventually going to be black. But guess what? Blue and brown make black. And that's close enough to just get me closer to where that's the final result's going to be. I have to figure out what sort of foliage do I want on here. I got the purple flowers and such, but what I'm going to do is show you, when it comes time, something that I want to make into a future tutorial. Basically homemade grass tufts. So I thought there's just a few places I could sneak those in, and guess what? My own flower tufts. Actually, I can show you some of those right now. What the heck? It's my video. I can do what I want. And we'll just let this dry a little bit. So I'm going to set that aside. So here's my own homemade tufts. Check this out. And thanks to a kind Christmas present, I now have 6mm grass. I had the 2 and the 4, but with 6, look at this nifty, tall tufts. Those are fun, but what's really, really, really fun is I could then make my shrub tufts here. Nice and tall with their little leaves on them. Last but not least, look what we got here. We have flower tufts. So I got the red flowers, and again, as I turn this on its side, you can see just how tall those are. There we go. This is something I want to do in an upcoming video. I don't know if I can film it here. I just don't think there's enough room. And it gets messy a little bit because there's static involved. But these, I think I made myself about $40 worth of tufts in a matter of minutes. So there was the savings of money, but also the savings of time, because it's all too often the tufts that I want are out of stock. They're just not even available. So yeah, that's something I have to think about all the time, and it was far more economical and time-saving for me to just take the dive, get the little static machine that cost $35 maybe, and actually the actual grass tuft material does not cost a bunch of money. And like I said, what you get from it is kind of worth its weight in gold, because those grass tufts ain't cheap. Not at all. And now you're making your own custom ones. So what did we just do? Just throwing a little bit of blue there while I had it. Gonna let that dry. So I have to figure out, what are we doing with the skin tone? Is it going to be lighter? Is it going to be darker? Oh, I may go, let's just go dark on it. Yeah, because we've got a skull on the cloak. I'm going to take some of that red and some of that green. Here we go. Just throw that right there. I know it's supposed to be an elf paladin. If you go to the Dark Sword website, which I can show you in a second. Again, I'm going to let this dry. Just Just placing this out here, nothing special. And as we let that dry, we're going to switch scenes. I wonder if she's on the first. No, she's not on the first page, but she's definitely kind of more of a shiny, bright type figure. But you can see all kinds of really fun, different miniatures on the Dark Sword site. And I'm going to go to the blog over here. And you can get more views of what we're doing. Now here, there's a white cloak on the inside, and yeah, we were able to do the glow on that. But I think I like the idea of the dark cloak on the inside better. And here again, we have our cloak with the kind of intertwining thing, a little bit of a floral pattern there, the skull. So I think the inside of the cloak there was white because I wanted it to mesh in with that marble base. And we did the marble base on the last one. So that was episode 8 of painting Dark Sword. Okay, we can get to work on the back part of this cloak here. And again, I'm using some of the stuff that's already out there. And now that this is dried a little bit, see, I can start to work in a little bit of shading here. Got nothing really fancy. Just some indications that it's there. And always remember that when if you want to lighten something that's red, you don't want to go to white. If you go to white, it's going to be pink, it's going to be chalky, it's going to be a lot of things you don't want. And see, I'm actually using this light green to highlight my red. You think, that is just insane. What are you doing? Well, that's exactly how I got that sort of muted burgundy color that you see in those reference pictures. And I also have to be aware that if I make this too light, too much highlighting, well, how is my freehand pattern really going to show up there without that being just extraordinarily bright? And we don't want that. So I think this almost goes along the same lines as taking the green and pink, mixing those together to make a gray. So again, we'll just give this one more shot here. And then turn around. I just realized I got to do this one here because I'm going to say this is the same color as the cloak. On the back, just getting a little bit of lighter colors there. Be done with it. Does the cloak come over here? It only comes over on this side. So I'm going to throw a little bit of the, here we go. Here's some of our clear yellow back on the palette. We mix it with the clear red to start getting an orange. Touch green to tone that down. And I'm going to crank up the brightness for you a little bit here. And it's something I have to do at these early stages because we have mostly midtones and darks out there on the palette at the time. So you can see, again, we're just starting to indicate where we might want some of our lights and darks to be. This is the other reason I'm going with more of a gold, and well, it has to do with the freehand pattern that we got. If we're going to mimic that freehand pattern, well, see here on the shield, I think you can see, look at that. This is a little bit of an indicator of what our armor color is going to be in the lighter areas. And you can see this will let me get some pretty fine lines. Now remember, I'm not going to put a whole bunch of highlights in this area because we want to do that blue glow. And sorry if it goes off screen. Sometimes that's just going to happen because I'm trying to get my hands in there and the miniature and the brush. It is the reason why I'm trying to get that second filming station in place, so I just have a bigger area to work with, especially for things like making those grass tufts. Because this is relatively, you can see I'm not shaking the table too much, shaking the camera. You better believe when it comes time to do those tufts, there's a whole lot of shaking going on. So the thing we can do is just add a little more of that yellow, and now see how it's starts to emerge a little bit. What do we not have out on the palette? It's kind of early for me to say that. We don't have white out here. Even with shiny armor of some kind and other things, we're just keeping that white off the palette until we really need it at the very end. Alright. We'll go a little bit over here. Some up here. And this is, to me, we're still just base coating here. I guess, what's the other word? Sketching or whatever, that's the other word that seems to be used for, I guess, a little bit what we're doing here. And I apologize if I just use my own terms. I think most of you that know me and know this painting style, it's got nothing to do with the conventional wisdom or the standard kind of stuff that you see all the time. This is a little more subversive, a little avant-garde. How's that? I'm going to go a little bit lighter here, touch lighter here. Yeah, nothing is final. I just want to, I don't even know what shapes are in some of these places. I'm starting to see some gemstones actually. Who knows, maybe that'll be a little sneaky thing that we throw in here too. And we're just going to lighten this up. Yeah, whatever. Not a big deal. That looks like armor. That looks like armor. I wasn't sure. Yeah, it's not just a bare midriff, as they might call it. And that's going to be just about enough with that. So what we're going to do now is just get some of the paint out of the brush here. And so as always, this is typical fluorescent paint here. It's a big old gob, but it looks really thick, right? But see how transparent that is as I just brush it out on the palette? We'll put some on the glove here. See how that doesn't really cover. That's what confuses people about the fluorescent paint. They think it's going to be some really bright, super covering paint. Nope, doesn't do that. That's what this is for. It is on the palette. I'm going to get that out of the way, and this is going to completely change our fluorescent blue here. It's now made it more opaque. Much more opaque, and look at that, now it covers. And you'll say, well, okay, what's the big deal? What did that really do? It actually does really liven up that blue. And I think once you start to see it against the other colors here, that's when it's really going to be noticeable. See what I'm doing here? This is going to be important. This right here. See, I'm just dragging this up here. It's a really important reflected light zone. You obviously want to reflect it on the ground, and yes, we'll probably do this on our grass tufts too, because that's kind of fun. It really makes your grass tufts look like they're part of the scene when you do some of the reflected light on them. And this is not a dry brush. I'm just dragging the brush over the surface here. We'll thin this down just a touch. And in here is going to be a little touch of our lighter tone. And you notice how, see how that's not, it's not completely covering that. It's not completely wiping out the dark, because we have just enough of the transparency of that fluorescent paint in there. So what are we going to do on some of the armor bits? We're going to try and make a little line here, like so. And that's the thing with armor. You tend to have a lot of linear highlights to it. They just kind of march up and up those plates. I think we're also maybe going to have just a touch of that reflect on the face. Another reason why I wanted the face to be a bit darker. So yeah, there was a little bit of method behind the madness. Look, we're going to put a little blue over here. So again, by not getting too involved in painting all these other surfaces, we're not really worried about that whole quote-unquote ruining something with our glow over the top, because we've kind of established where everything's going to be. But we don't have 3 hours invested in painting one specific area. It's the point of the shaded base coat, is to, well, keep you from doing that. Because, like the whole thing with the freehand and even non-metallic effects, I can remember our early days, going way back to 2003, 2004, even earlier than that, 2002, and painting all kinds of stuff for hours and hours, and then trying to put an effect over the top of that. And just thinking, oh boy, I really hope that I don't screw this up. Because I wasn't doing the shaded base coat stuff at that point. Didn't know about it. Hadn't developed it yet. So what I'm going to do is, I don't think I want the end of the sword to be the light part. I'm going to have it sort of generating its own, almost like it's red hot to the touch, but it's going to be blue. So lighter here and darker out towards the fringe of that, to the end of the sword, the tip of it. You know, we could have thrown snow and ice on this base, maybe. So it's some kind of frost damage blade. I mean, that's a fairly common sort of D&D thing, I guess. So yeah, I'm even using a little bit of maiden flesh to lighten that up. See, this is the other reason. There was a few runes right there, and I thought, okay, maybe it's the runes that provide the magical energy. A little sneaky way, maybe to throw in a little bit of story, because we want the miniatures to tell a story. And the best way is to just think of those little effects like that, where you just throw in little detail people may not see when they first look at it, but when they just give it another look-see, start to look a little closer, and they notice some of those nifty things that you added in. And this is the other reason I want to get into white, because, well, this is probably the area we're going to want to have the most of. If we're going to use white for anything to lighten stuff up, it's going to be here on this sword blade. So best to keep that particular arrow in your quiver and not use it straight away. I think I did with the magenta mage, the little flashlight trick. I shined a light on the miniature just to see, okay, where would that light hit? And there are also tiny little flashlights with different color bulbs. And that's one way to see maybe how the color might be affected. So and they're just dirt cheap. They're a couple of pennies each. All right, so see we've got and looking at this, we're starting to have that difference in the gold / copper versus this icy cold blue. So it's not taking long for us to start to see the difference between those two. Let's turn this around, and this is basically towards the end of what we're going to say is the shaded base coat here. I'm going to get back some of that red back out here. Again, that's the clear red. What are we doing here? So I think pretty soon I'm going to be able, well, actually the next stage I'm going to turn the brightness down because we've already gotten back a fair chunk of our lights and darks. And you're going to notice here on the cloak, I don't want this area down here to have the same level of highlights as this stuff up here. I used to do that all the time in the early days. The feet and the bottom of the cloak would have almost the same level of highlighting as the top of the cloak, which, as I thought about it, made absolutely no sense. Because how's that light down there, or that highlighting, going to be brighter than what's up at the top of the shoulders, an open area that's going to catch more of that light? And it's, even now, it's, sometimes I'm going along, and I say, oops, okay. All right, let's chill out on highlighting the bottom edge of the cloak, because that doesn't need it. It's just with practice and constantly reminding yourself that eventually you start to not do that. And let's go just a touch lighter. Right. And I'll say it again, to me, this is just a base coat. This is how I see base coats. I know the standard approach is you just paint a flat color, then maybe you throw a glaze over it, or maybe you start to add your lighter layers over the top. I realize that's just not what's going to be happening in these videos. I think if you've seen the other ones, you know there's no such thing really as a flat base coat at all. We just get in there and we start putting colors down. And we're right about there. All right. We've established enough lights and darks on the cloak. We're going to go back. We'll do a few things, say on the skin tones here. Do some things on the armor. Then start to affect our glow. I think we're going to leave the freehand till after the glow and some of these other things. Okay, because we're going to be sketching that out and doing some different stuff. So stay tuned for some more work on the golds, right? Establishing this glow a little bit more with by adding a few more darks in here. So you think that we've established all of the glow that we need, the brightest lights and the darkest darks and our bluish glow. Haha, think again. We're going to do some more. We've got the maggot white out here on the palette. That's a little bit lighter color. Got the blue verdigris back out there again. And I'm actually going to start out by adding a little more blue glow over here, because let's see if we can line this up right. So see how that lines up This needs not a lot, but it needs a hint of blue glow. Just give it a little bit of a hint of it, that's all. So see now, when that lines up, you can see it's starting to hit the arm right there. And I see a few other places where it's needed. This is that huge advantage of starting out with the glow in place as opposed to adding it on after the fact. There's just every reason to do it and no reason not to do it, so good enough. Good enough. Now, we talked about making this lighter, so here's some of the mint green and just a touch. All it takes is a little touch of that fluorescent paint there, and I'm going to add some more in here. And I know that maybe on camera it doesn't do much because it's just so intense it almost is burned out, but that is definitely making a difference there. You'll see it more in these other areas that we added to. See, we're just finding a few places where, okay, where is it really going to leave a brighter highlight color? Definitely the armor surfaces, well, they're metal. They're the most reflective, more so than skin or cloak. Always something I have to keep in mind. That those shiny surfaces with all the more sharp edges, that's going to obviously take in a little more of the glow. And as I start to do this, and we're getting a little more delicate, a little more refined, but yet we still have that big brush in place. It keeps us honest, it keeps us from trying to dive into some of that fine little detail stuff too quick, because we're just trying to stay away from that. Don't want to get bogged down into details right off the bat. And even here, I can throw in just a touch more. A little indication of that there. Again, on the ground here. Who knows, maybe I need some more. Now there's a way to use, let's get a lot of the lighter colors out there. And remember we talked about how translucent that is. Well, if I use it almost, it's almost like it's a wash of it here. It's not really a wash per se, but I've definitely thinned it down. And watch what it'll do here on this cloak. See that? It tones that down. It's actually darkening things down, but at the same time, it's intensifying the blue colors in the cloak. So you're basically working lighter to make it darker. I don't know any better way to explain it than that. See, look what we just did there on the knee of the... Oh, I used to know what that armor was called. Certainly not a knee pad. Don't want to just refer to it as that. I think it's more of a Greek term for that. But anyways, see what I'm doing here? Is basically just toning down that blue glow, darkening it down in some places. See, on the end of the sword. And we can now take some of our verdigris blue and add it to that. It starts to make it that much darker. And now it's almost like there's almost a little bit of a shadow going on here. Let's see, the glow that on the cloak that was so bright and just so, I intentionally made that lighter so I could go over the top. See, there's also a few different colors in that bluish glow. It's not all just teal. It's almost a little more ultramarine blue in there now. It's that chess match that we talk about all the time. Thinking ahead. Thinking, okay, this is what I eventually need to get. Oh, look, we're doing the same thing here. So, get it on. Yeah, that's better. See how this up here is light, and this, look how that gets darker. So we're essentially shading our glow effect. And then guess what? We're going to do the same thing up here. We're going to do the same thing over here. Because I'm sure that as people are watching that, they're going, oh my goodness, that's just too much. That's too intense to start off with. What's going on? Well, this was the idea, is that it starts out being that intense, but then you start to knock it down. And again, we have a difference here in color temperature. So this is icy cold here, or icy hot, depending on how you're seeing it, and that's more dark. Speaking of dark, I'm going to throw just a touch of blue liner out here, like so. Get some of the fluorescent blue mixed in. Don't want to lose that color tone. So again, I got to make sure that I keep some of the fluorescent stuff in there. And I think it's where you can see it. And now we'll just go a little more even. See, just a touch more there. So that makes this look more intense just by default. And it gives it, I don't want to say the molten look, but when you're seeing, say, a sword that's pulled out of the forge, it's all red hot at the end. Obviously not where the handle is, where the guy's holding it. So we're doing kind of the opposite here. We're generating that glow from the inside out. And what am I doing now? Starting to actually put in a few little shadows here. Because while we do have the overall light that's being cast by the environment, as we'll call it, you also have to think about the shadows quite literally cast by this sword, by the weapon. That's what we're doing in here. Just adding in a few of those, not doing everything yet. See, even here in those folds, let's do a little more over here. Let's do a little more over here. And back even in here. So see how much more shape we've got going on here now. Didn't take long, did it? Oh look, I can do the same thing to the face, to some parts of the helmet here. And as I do this, you're starting to see the armor. That's starting to come alive a little bit more. Because remember, that's something we wanted to do at this stage, right? It was in the title. I don't always give you exactly what I promise, but sometimes I do. Like so. And a few more of those here. Here. Might even touch a few of these runes just to give them a little bit of a shadow. Right, and I'm just going to continue some of this Now look at that line I can do with this big old freaking brush. Maybe it takes you a little while to get used to it yourself. You haven't really done it before. Be patient with yourself. I always tell people to be patient. Okay. That's pretty well set. I'm going to go back to the lighter side of things here. There it is. I'm just looking for my fluorescent stuff because what I want to do, let's see if this will work here. Oh, it's about where we need it. What I want to do is something like this. Okay, now grab a touch of the maggot white here. I just want to make this look a little bit more like a blade. I think you can see what we're trying to do here. I'm just trying to get a little bit of an edge here on this blade. Gonna do the same thing up here, and see how I can just, this big old brush, just scrape it along the edge there. Oh, get this down here where you can see it. A little more there. Again with the runes there. So just a few little doodads here and there. Yeah, that's the scientific technical term, doodads. What do we got here? And believe it or not, sounds crazy, but I can still go lighter because we still have saved in our arsenal of tricks. We have saved white, and that'll be our last thing that we add. And basically some of the final stuff before we think about messing around with that homemade static grass / tuft material. And we're going to go again back in with some of this. What do we got here? That's better. Just going to smooth a few things out. And now, remember I said don't keep beating one area to death. So it is just about time to step away from this, and now we'll go back to the armor a touch. Yeah, just gotta reestablish something there, and good enough for now. Remember, that's why we put this clear yellow out here. Yeah, looks like you can still see what I've got over here. And it's my, good. Still some of that maiden flesh left. And I'll get her where you can see it. Gonna start to add some lighter colors here. Not final highlights, but just what I did on the sword and those other things. Now it comes time to do the same here with the armor, where we add in some lights and tone it down with some shading. Looks like we've got some sort of a earring over here. And looks like there's one over here too. And now let's start to think about some reflected light on these things. So I have to start thinking about okay, we've really thought long and hard about the object source lighting, but now we got to make sure that we also think about the armor and what's going to happen there. And it's with metal, you need a little bit more than just lights and darks. You need them to be strategically placed. You also want to have a little bit of color changes to them. Alright, got this. Let's see how much lighter we can go with just the maiden flesh on some of these lights here. So I'm going to bring in some, like so. And again, if you are not comfortable working with this big of a brush on this fine of a surface, well then, yeah, I have the sable brushes too. I've got Kolinsky sables. I got the Series 7. I got the zeros and the double zeros and the triple zeros and all that. I have them too. And if you're more comfortable with those, by all means, use them. I'm only in a minor way trying to terrorize you. It's supposed to be, again, a fun thing for you. Painting is supposed to be your hobby. The whole idea of these videos is to just make it actually a little more fun for you, because you have, maybe it just leaves you with a little more time to do things. Maybe it reduces the stress a little bit. And while I've got this lighter color, I'm just going to see if I can figure out exactly where our eyes are going to be. One there. And I always just sort of make the eyes a little bit bigger than they need to be. Here's my my red liner. Going to mix it with the maiden flesh. So there's almost kind of a purpley type color to the skin. There's not a lot of it there because, well, the glow takes over a lot of that. So we're just going to have a little bit of it over here. Like so. A little bit of it here. Where's my... Oh, there it is. Okay, back to where you can see it. And now, so I can go back in there and start to take away some of that eye color that went in there. It's easier just kind of go in there and slap it on there before I've painted any stuff around it. There we go. And we're going to grab some of our green here. Will we throw a little touch of red in there? Yeah, just a touch. Not really doing this as a verdigris effect. It's just in stuff like gold. You tend to have greens in there. And if there's this green pushing itself up against some of these reds, and we're eventually going to have some oranges in here, it starts to give you, I know it's not the correct term, but I always call it the spectral effect. So see what we just did back here? This little bit, see it's more yellowy here, and then it goes to this cooler green over here. We are also going to do something similar right there. So we aren't really affecting the lighter dark, but we did affect the color, and we're even going to do some of that here with the red of the shield color. And we're going to do some over here. Going to do some on these rocks. That's actually parsley flakes and tea leaves, if you can believe that. I have plenty of basing tutorials, and obviously I'm always making more of those. So see, we're just Here, let's throw some of that on that here. Right. Here's our red liner. We will mix it with our Maiden Flash, get it a little bit lighter. And now we're, once again, starting to add a little more light to our skin color. You can see I'm trying to stay away from where my bluish glow is on the face. Trying to maintain just a semblance of shadow area there. So, like I said before, if your highlights on a surface are brighter than the glowing effect of whatever, that light that's cast, it's gonna, it won't necessarily wipe out your glowing effect, but it is going to, you're not going to have as much of it, that's for sure. It will not look as intensely bright. And we'll just keep working with that. We're going to add a little more Maiden Flash to that. So at this point, so we're going to stop with what we've got going on here, because we're getting a pretty good establishment of even the armor effect. What do we want to do? We want to do something with our cloak here. I'm actually going to do is get a piece of paper and pencil, pen, whatever. And what we're going to do is do a little exercise with the cloak. Because you can see we have two different shapes here of cloaks. How do we take that design from the left and sort of transpose it on here? So stay tuned for that. We'll have the paper, pencil, whatever, and we'll transpose our design. So we've got ourselves a piece of paper here. And what we want to do is, like I said before, transpose the shape that we've got of the cloak that's just more. I'm going to use this part of it here. So you have a cloak that's more, say, this shape. Let's make this a little bit darker here. There we go. You have a cloak that's more this shape to start with, and now you've got another cloak that's more this shape. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to knock this down even more. That's better. And we've got that pattern that we're going to either have to squish, you know, where you've got the skull here, and you've got this. We either got to compress that, or we're just going to have to extend it more broadly over this area. So let's make this about, now this is a little bigger than the size of the actual cloak. This is something I also suggest is maybe you draw something out the first time and it's more comfortable for you to draw. The second time, though, you want to have it be as close to the size of the figure, because there's times where we've done stuff where it's real easy when it's this gigantic size of this whole piece of paper, and then we go to put it on the figure and we go, oh my goodness, there's just, I can't get it that small. And here's the other thing too. So this is just the skull right here. See how we've had to reorient it this way? Whereas before it was straight up and down like that. So we also have to reorient our pattern here. And then I have to think, okay, I've got these two main things that cross here. This sweeps down and around. This sweeps down and around. We've got this sort of a floral type thing that comes out like this. We also have this petal here. And then we've got almost sort of a crown here. And it sweeps down around the skull. But then this comes up and over. So I think you can see the pattern that starts to emerge here, and maybe I change it and make it even a little more angular. So see, it's going to be sharper, pointier, more angled. And then we've got this. And I'm going to change that too. And I just have to think, okay, what are we going to do with this? So I'm going to have that go down here. And these have to go somewhere. Alright. And I got this little diamond shape that's down here. And what I might do is something like this. So that pattern continues, and maybe even something like this. So I'm altering the design. Who knows, maybe I even put a little kind of a gold line along here along the bottom. Might do that. All the while just starting to plot what I might want to do. Because remember that shield that we have, we're trying to also match that shield. But you're also trying to do a design that you feel like you can actually match with the brush. You can draw all kinds of nifty stuff, but then all of a sudden it comes time to work with the brush, and that's not so easy. So see, we changed it again here. Again, making this more pointed. See what I just did there? So I don't think the last time I did something like this was on the original Painting Pyramid freehand video. So it's been a long time since I've done something like this. And I've been looking forward to it for a while, and I saw this miniature and I thought, yeah, maybe this could be fun. And I just figured it's something that could be helpful. So there's our nifty little pattern. And this is then what we are going to try and execute on our cloak, right? So I'm going to do is see if I can put this where the palette cam is, see if it can pick that up. And then we'll try and replicate our cloak. So this is just a brief little segment, again, where we sketch out our design. And now comes the real fun part, where we transpose this to the figure. Now you know I didn't get too involved in all of the shading on that, because we got a lot of stuff that we have to pack in there. So stay tuned, and we're going to put this pattern now on the cloak, the main event. I have some paint out on the palette again, and it is time to transfer that design. You can see I've got sitting where the palette cam is. Now the colors that we're using, it's the same sort of clear yellow, clear red mix. A little touch of green to get it towards ochre. But we have to transpose that pattern. And of course, you've got something going on here that you couldn't replicate on the piece of paper, and that is the folds. And as you see, our little skull here, which is going to be kind of in the center. I'm moving it up a little bit because I want it to actually be sort of split in half. So there's this part here, and now that'll be in shadow. It's also important to keep this relatively thin. And here's the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark myself a little line right here. Again, you can use a smaller brush if you want. I may just go to a smaller one just so that people don't panic quite so much as they see me doing this with a big gigantic brush. So you can see straight away what even that adds. And there's times where all I do is just add some lines to the thing. It just keeps things a little bit simple. When you're maybe not feeling quite as confident about what you want to do. So remember, we have to mark out some of these areas here. So see, I'm marking out, X marks the spot right there. But remember, I also wanted some of these little triangles to be here. Or diamonds, not triangles, what am I saying? So I have to space these out. Trying to do it somewhat evenly, but you can't do it necessarily too evenly. Because, well, then it's not going to look very natural. It's not going to look like there's folds. So here's our little bit that goes around the skull. And I just start to feel my way through this. So I'm going to do this little bit of an angled piece here. And remember, I've got these pieces that come up to a point here. And remember, I changed this pattern. The whole reason I made those come to a point is because, see how this is all bit and folded and shoved together here? Just thought it'd be a little bit easier to carry that pattern. And this goes all the way down here and connects to that, as does that piece there. And I don't have to worry about perfection or anything like that. What I do now have to worry about is, where is this design gonna go? So a lot of this little floral thing here is down inside this crevice, so it's just not going to be, it's not going to be as light as everything else. We're actually going to shade this pattern darker here. So we have to have this go around here. And then this carries down and around here. You're also going to see me make adjustments to this, just based on the reality of, now I've got this huge cloak to worry about here that's got all these folds and everything else, so that's going to change, again, how I see this. It's going to change what I can maybe even do. You can also see that I vary the thickness of the lines. Some are thinner, some are thicker. And then there's this element here. So you're going to recognize some parts of it, and other parts you're going to say, wait a minute, that wasn't originally there. And I'm going to say, haha. Again, with the haha. Because sometimes I'm just mischievous that way. Now this, can you see it? Good, good, you can see it. So we're doing this, and it's going to come up and over here. It comes to a point. Also trying to have this not just follow the folds of the cloak, but the spread of the cloak. And now this is where the line gets thicker. See that? It's thicker there. That's thinner here. It gets thicker again. Then it gets thinner. Now we've got to try and mirror this on the other side. And one of the reasons for that, drawing it out the way I did, it's about muscle memory. Because I've done it, and I just did it before. It's going to be a little bit easier to replicate something that I just did. My hand's going to say, all right, yeah, I know that pattern. I just did it. Even though it's so very different executing it on here than it is on that piece of paper. There's enough familiarity with it See, now we've got our design. It's even, see how it pretty much mimics what's on the palette there. Now we can, this is where we can add some stuff because, well, now we've got it pretty well established on the figure itself. See, here I'm adding just a little more to that. And this is the other thing we can do is just making sure that you can see it. You know, maybe we add another element to it down here. So there's a little extra flourish there. And what I'm going to do is actually fill this out here. That's a little different. And then we're going to put an additional line here. This is the other reason why I didn't bother painting all of that red on here. Because in effect I could have potentially been painting all this stuff that I was just going to cover up anyways. So you can see how I'm starting to add on to this. See, maybe I even do another extra pattern here that wasn't on the drawing. So I just added these couple little elements to it. This is the time to do that. You know, play around with it, see if you want to add some more or not. But then we don't want to necessarily go crazy with this. Let's see how we're mimicking what's on the shield. So there's just, it's even some of the patterns that I see on the helmet and such. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to drop a little shading on this. Out comes the red liner. You can't see it, just pretend it's there. Red liner, and remember it was red liner and red, clear red. And we're just going to do some glazes over the top of this. So, poof, right there. Right in here. Like so. Take some of this away. Look what it's doing to our freehand pattern, which some of you might have said, all right, great, he's got it drawn in there. How the heck is he going to shade that? This is something that I just almost learned by accident, and I said, oh, well, yeah, we're doing that from now on. Remember how we made the object source lighting a little bit lighter to start with, and then kind of went darker? Well, we're doing the same thing with our cloak, and guess what? Some of that same darker color is going to work its way into our armor to do a little bit of shading there. Because you thought I was going to ignore the armor, that I was going to get all wrapped up in just the cloak and the freehand and the nope, not doing that. Can't be fooled that easily. So here we are, look at this. We're back out here on the rest of the miniature doing shading and stuff. On the armor and the shield. So I'm going to go back in here again. So now, even at this early stage, we've already knocked down those areas of the cloak and say, why'd you do that then? Now before I start adding any kind of lights to the cloak to make it as light as this, it's a lot easier to shade it first. That's, like I said, I always talk about hard lessons learned. That's one of those hard lessons learned. Oh yeah. And what are we going to do in here? I'm going to grab a little more. Again, sorry you can't quite see this, but I think it's still important to have the design out there. We're just going to make this a little lighter now. Get some water out here so it's reasonably thinned down, but it's not like water. Get this where you can see it, and I think you can tell what we're doing is now just we're going to start to add a little bit of light to some of these elements here, a little bit to that skull. Right here, get the eye sockets going. Get this to cross over the top. But all the while, making sure that I don't go too far, otherwise, what was the point of shading it? It's all just going to be highlighted. But if I go too far, as you saw, I can just go right over the top of it and knock that back down again. This obviously gonna be much lighter because of where it's at. And you can see as I use these lighter tones, it's a little bit easier to get a thinner edge. We'll do the same thing over here. We've got our little diamond shapes down here. And again, if I need to, I can always knock it back down. Here we go. And there's that little crest over the skull, right? Get this filled in here. Like so. And now down here. Got this little element. And we've got these over here that we added in. That just attached to that. Become a bit of a spiral here. And we've got our interior pattern here that we're going to bring out a bit, but not too much. Again, it's right inside a big old fold. So it just doesn't make sense. See, and I can even move that over. So I got a big old mess there until we grab our red liner, clear red, and I just shifted that over a bit. So you can see it's still possible to make changes. I'm going to do the same thing here so we can move things around. I'm actually just literally pushing some of this freehand around, altering it, sharpening up some edges here and there. Doing the same thing around here. And that is why the cloak, the color that I painted on the cloak was a tad bit lighter than what it was originally or was finally going to be. And we'll knock this back down again. I just have a slightly darker version of the gold color there. And I'm just knocking this down again, temporarily here. So I see that I can actually make that a little bit lighter. Here we go. Swing this. See, this is the part of the pattern that goes all the way down and attaches there. Same thing here. And you can add as much refinement to this as you want, as you need to. If you have to play a game of role playing that night or something, well, okay, this will get you through that. Then you finish it off later when you have time. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to just later on go back to it. Finish off some more, a little more here, a little more there. And as I've mentioned in other videos, I would not recommend when you're first sitting down to do some miniature painting, you probably don't want this to be the first thing you do. Maybe this is one of the last, maybe not the last thing you do if you're going to be tired. But it's certainly, you want to let yourself get sort of warmed up, get your hand steadied. Now, I had been shoveling snow earlier today and basically taking snow off of a roof. You can believe that I had to wait a while for my hand to steady up and be in the right place to be able to do what I'm doing now. It would have looked really, really jittery. That's for sure. So we just extend that. We sharpen some of those points. So over here, I'm going to do the same thing with the darker red on this. See my little diamond shape there, bring that back. Again, I'm just sharpening things up, changing the pattern. And just so this doesn't get too much into the plain red, let's try doing some fun here. What are we going to use? Let's see what happens when we use some of the blue there. Alright, I think I can take this away. I think you've seen what you need to see there. We're going to change our camera back around. Here we go. We're going to change that thing. Let's make this palette a little bit smaller here. Can you still see the brush there? Good. So we're down on the bottom of the palette over here. We got a little bit of that blue, taking a little bit of the red. Sort of making a purple color here. Let's see if I can get a little bit of that maiden flesh in there. And the idea is maybe get a little more, trying to actually get some here. Go back to that. And I need some more maiden flesh out here. We're almost trying to make this more of a pinkish purple color here. Whereas the other, remember the highlights we did before had a little bit of green in them. So what we're trying to do is now almost get a little bit of a blue in what is supposed to be our shadows. It's a little bit like what we did to the armor. Let's see what happens here. Is that where you can see it now? It is. Yeah, this is what we wanted to do. I'm going to make that a little bit darker. Throw a little more blue in that. Where are we at? And I'm just getting a little, see that little touch of blue in there? And the same thing on the shield here. It just makes it a little more interesting than if it's just, alright, it's a darker shade of red. Yay. It's not all that interesting necessarily. So see, I'm even throwing a little shade darker of blue in there, just give it a little more of a mystery. So we shade that darker, and it even applies to the shading of our freehand. So remember I said we're going to shade it multiple times, or we just shaded it again. Let's see, we can constantly just keep going back and forth here. It's just going to make it a little more interesting. Here we need to darken this down for sure. Sometimes I almost make the freehand pattern disappear a bit. Say, what the heck are you doing there? Well, sometimes it looks less like, oh, I've taken like a printed flag and wrapped it around a miniature. It looks more, again, a natural freehand pattern. When you see, say, a painting or whatever, you're not going to see the entire pattern like it just was printed and then wrapped around them. It's, some parts of it literally do disappear. And now we can get back in here and start to add some lights, sharpen up some of these, well, for lack of a better term, sharpen up some of these points. And what we'll do in our next segment is we're gonna get back to, say, the face and do some final highlights, and we'll do some other painting details there before it's time to add our little bits of static grass and tufts and that sort of thing. And the reason I want to show the adding of that is we're probably going to add a little bit of paint to those to make sure that they also have a bit of glowing effect on them. So stay tuned for that. So here we go. So that pretty well sets you up now with your freehand. It's got its shading on there. We've toned it down in some areas, brightened it up in others. And next we're going to get back to the face and putting some highlights on the armor, that sort of thing. We might even have some white out on the palette, heaven forbid. So I'll be right back with that. We're back with some final details on this. We're going to do some stuff on the face, highlights here and there, and that's why now finally we actually have some white out here, which you can't even see. That's how much brighter that is than everything else we've got on here, and we were saving that just for this occasion, because now so I can go in here and start to highlight a few edges of this, parts of the shield here. And obviously we're gonna try and drop some highlights on our armor here, just in a few places, because we've been setting this all up the entire time we've been doing this, just waiting for just the right time to add these in. So right here, see, I've got this little bit of filigree there. There's some more over here, the edge of the helmet. We've got this edge of the helmet here. There's the little, basically an earring type thing here. This side of the helmet, some more filigree stuff. And we're not 100% covering all of that, obviously. Because if it's all highlighted equally, then it's also going to lose its shape. So here on this plate, just find a few spots. And we're going to add some of these lighter highlights. It's just about giving a little bit of sparkle and shininess maybe to some of these armor plates. We'll also get into the skin tones a touch here. Still have to try and say things like the eyes. And over here, this is where, good, you can see that. So some of these highlights, just trying to make those a little brighter than the object source lighting. As I've said before, you want where it's not right here in the thick of it, you're going to want your regular highlights to be a little bit lighter than that. So it doesn't look like the entire thing is being lit up by a sun. It is just the glowing sword after all. So we're just dropping in a few of these, like so. Not everywhere, just in a few places. So it's starting to give it a little bit of a shimmer there. Now we also have this part of the helmet, but gotta make sure we don't lose our blue glow. And we'll be getting to that in a second here. Just a few more touches on some of these regular highlights here. On some of these filigree patterns again. The hair has been made darker. It's another one of those game time decisions that you make. Here we go. Again, sometimes you just say, okay, that needs to be a little less blue and a little more gold, vice versa. And just trying to focus in here. Can't talk quite as much because I'm in some cases holding my breath so that I can actually get to some of this stuff here. Now I'm gonna maybe just go with some white here. Let's see how much more we can do in the eyes. Right here. Let's turn this around and get the other one, then we'll add some more of the here. Okay, and I've got a little bit of the red liner still out here, so let's see if we can get some few lighter skin tones up here around the eyes, on the forehead and the ears. Again, trying not to lose what I did with the blue-ish colors of the object source lighting. Here we go, a little reflected light there. And now here, And here we've got the hand that needs a little bit more. That's not blue. Down here. So you can see that after a while, you start to work in a increasingly controlled way, if you want to call it that, or just more delicate, whatever the word might be. Just going to throw a few little lights on the hair over here, which I might tone down again with some of the blue liner later on. I don't want the face to get too light or pale. The reason I'm using the white on this is because I do actually trying to gray it down a little bit. So instead of using, say, the Maiden Flesh to do this, I guess I wanted to have a cooler feel to it. Alright, and then looks like I still got my blue liner over here. I'm going to drop this down. Gonna have her try looking off to the left here. So see if we just drop the eye in there. And then bring that out. Your eyelid and the eye. Yeah, your eyelid. Little bit on the eyebrow too. And I'm gonna get some of the. This is some of that mint green or mint. Yeah, I think it was mint green. So I'm trying to do a little on the lips there. Trying to extend up some of the blue color here. Underside of the eye a bit. Now, let's get some of our white over here. Touch of the, again, the mint green. See what kind of lights we can add to things like our sword here. And I just didn't want to bring this out to the very, very end. You know, a few touches on the runes. A little bit of poof on the sword blade there. Let's do a little run right there. And I still have my fluorescent paint out there, so we can do a little bit of that. Here, let's take some more. And you'll notice as I mix it with the white, it's not quite the greenish blue that it was. But now it's going to be a little brighter here. I'm going to keep going over here a little bit, and I'm going to go back, add some more white. I'm trying to get a few lighter dots right in here. Remember that line of highlights I was talking about? This is where we're going back in to do that now. And this is where, even at this late stage, we could still go back over those and tone them down if we really needed to with some of our blue. And those are the kind of things that you just assess on your own when you look at your figure, say, yeah, okay, I should tone that down a bit. And oh, see, that's down in your little lower corner there. You know, we've got some of the blue mixed up, and that can go in here. Can go onto the face a little bit. Just gives it that bluish, little hint of a bluish tinge. And you can, again, this is your thing. You can take it as far as you want. You could have stopped before we ever even got to this. You didn't have to do freehand on it. That's too challenging. But I always enjoy the challenge. So before we get too wrapped up in that, I'm gonna go back around here. Let's see what we can do with some lighter things here. Let's see, it looks like you can see it. And we're just going to try and mark out a few areas here. Make those stand out just a touch. So it gives it a little more dimension to it. So here, this definitely needs to be brought back. Same here. And in some ways, it's a little bit like what we did on the armor, that string of highlights. So see how we got highlight, 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 but it's darker on either side. So a lot of these principles apply in multiple ways. Definitely gonna try and lighten this up a bit. Because it should not be, we don't want it to be too much in shadow. See how that gives that just a touch more sparkle there than it had before. There's another one. And again, if I go too crazy, let's say, oh, darn it, I made it just too light. What did we do before? We toned it down. Just a few glazes tones it down. So let's see if we can't. Here we got some of this. Got to get some of the red liner back out here. Here it is. And I'm just going to try and add see what I can do here where this eye is. I almost need to get a little more shadow. That's what I needed. It was starting to get too light right around the eyes. So again, another one of those little adjustments that you do. And what I am going to do is I just need a little more orange. So there's a little bit of that secret weapon. Was it yellow rust? Yellow rust. Just added that in there. It's for some of my golds. I need to get almost a little bit more of an orangey feel to it, and the clear yellow is almost a little bit too cold for that. So now with my orange here, I can go in and just, yeah, that's all I needed. It's not much, it's just a little bit of orange zest that I'm going to add here. Even in some parts of the cloak where it just got too, again, it was, the colors were too cold. In effect, warming that up a bit. Yeah, and that is definitely adding some things that I wanted to, and So here as well, this is also gonna warm up this part of the armor. Trying to add a little bit of reflected light in here. You see what that does right there? I'll turn it around. Yeah, that's better. Again, there's enough muted colors there. What were we missing? We were missing actually some bright, some more intense, warm colors. Just missing some of that. And I'm going to do the same thing over here too. So that some of that plays off of those, that greens that went down here in this area. And even here on this. Get away from the blue over here. I'm not going to put on here. Let's see, now this gets a little separation. Whoops. From those. From the side that's supposed to be more warm. I can even throw a little bit of the red liner in there to make it a little darker. I'm going to try and get a bit of reflection in here. I don't think you can see it, so it's going to be one of those things that I just do later because you won't be able to see what's going on. And just see, there's the shields in the way. Trying to get a little bit of reflected light in here because again, it's supposed to be armor, supposed to be metal. Try and get a little bit down back in there. Now I'm going to go back to my more my orangey type color here. I guess that's a word. I just made up another orangey. Yeah, I'm going to call it a word. Because we're making up words here. That's what we're doing. So that starts to give your freehand a little more depth to it. Like I said, you can go back into things. I can go back over that again and change it around again if I wanted to. But now I'm going to throw some white back out here. Like so. We will do a few more things. Got the bluish glow. I need something on the face there. Faces. I have to see just how much glow is cast on the underside of the face here. And just gonna start down here, work my way up. I don't want to, again, that's something if I go too crazy with it, then it almost starts to look like it's maybe shiny metal or something, because there's just so much light reflecting on it. So trying to approach this gradually here. Yeah, that's a little better. A little bit on the nose. Yeah, I haven't really done this much, say, of a glow on a small miniature face. I do have that other, the Frozen Ninja 3D video that I did. That one's got some, that definitely has some serious facial highlighting from object source lighting, but then that's a really tiny figure. As in really, no, I mean really huge, sorry. This is really tiny in comparison. Here's some more of this. So this is where I can now start to just start to bring out a few more of these, like the cheekbone here, ever so slightly. We'll do it here. And I'm just going to mess around with something here, see what happens with a touch of red right there. See what I just added there? I'm going to try and add some over here. Just to try and add some boldness to it. And then I'm going to add some of that clear red and throw a touch of the yellow rust in there to warm that up. And what am I doing? Look at this. On the little plume here on the helmet, it's not just reflected light, we've just changed it to be a bit warmer. And when people look at it, especially from any kind of distance, they'll never notice that. But the longer they check it out, the more that's going to become apparent. I'm also going to throw a few of those onto the cloak here. Again, we want to keep this as interesting as possible, and that means throwing out a little bit of these changes in color. What did I call them? I think in the last couple of videos I referred to them as the color surprise. Let's see, we've warmed up the freehand on there. Why not warm up the actual metal color a little bit too? And now I'm going to say that's about what we're going to do for the figure. What I'm going to do in the last little segment is grab some of those homemade tufts that I was talking about, and maybe we'll stick one here, and we'll hit it with the fluorescent paint, do a few other fun things like that. And that will be the end of, that'll be the final thing we do in Dark Sword, Painting Dark Sword Episode 9. So I promised you a conversation about homemade grass tufts, and that's what we're going to have. So again, these are the ones that I made, and I found the blog post. Again, you can hit this one up yourself. Guess what? Homemade tufts. You can see some of the materials involved. Those are for the flowers there. So this is making the shrub tufts here. So you can see just all you do is a little bit of glue, and then you can throw on some leaves. Same thing for flowers. You do the same exact thing. See, we throw on some glue. Got our purple stuff there. Now we have flowers. And I just use a little electrostatic machine. It's from WWS. Again, I'm going to try and do a whole video on that. What I've got to do is pick out some of these tufts. Get them on here, right? So I'm going to make sure my focus is better. There it is, right? And we're going to drop some super glue down here. Somewhere, I'm going to say there. Now I'm going to need one of my smaller grass tufts. Let's see how this works here. I'm going to use my little pen. Take that off of there. Come on. Use the pin. Help clamp that down. And oh my goodness. That is so much different than the grass tufts that I've made before with the shorter grass. Wow. That's pretty nifty. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to hit that with the glowing stuff, but wait, I want to add some more tufts first. Because now, well, this way the tufts would be, they'll look a little bit different. You'll notice the object source lighting more on one. So here we go. Just using that pin, shove that down onto our base there. Sometimes you really have to shove it down in there. That's what the pin's handy for. And maybe we'll do one more small one in here. What the heck? Why not? I'm going to try and drop a small. So I try and do all these different sizes. Where's my small ones here? Here's a nice little one. You could always try and cut these two. So there's right there. So we've got our tufts in place. Take this away. Get that glue off the palette because we don't want to be getting glue on brushes. Although rubbing alcohol will work to get rid of that. And let's get ourselves some of our blue glow color out on the palette. And I'm going to go with this. So I don't want it to be too intense. So let's see what we got here. Mix this up. Be pretty vigorous. See how the brush is spread out like so. And now we'll brush this over the top. Ever so slightly. Guess what? We're going to hit this one too. I'm going to even go a little brighter here. So we lighten that up. Again, spreading that brush out. And you can see we're just going to brush this up over the top. So see how that grass now just, it's not going to be blue, but yeah, now I can hit my base here that I know just how much of the grass that I've gotten here. This is another reason I wanted the taller grass because, hey, be nice and close to that sort. So see, I'm even touching a little bit more here. Just giving that a little more oomph to it. Here, let's go. I'm going to go the opposite way here with some of this blue. Again, hit some of the base. And there you've got it. And now it's going to look very different than this one back here. So thanks again for watching this latest edition of Painting Dark Sword. This is episode 9. Episode 10, we're going to try and cover some more fun things, combination of techniques. I think that's maybe almost more important now at this point because it's one thing to just see one technique on a thing, but, well, combining those. Because here you see, like, the freehand potentially and this, sometimes they can almost fight with each other a little bit. So sometimes I try to come up with things where you're going to get to see multiple techniques on the same figure, see how they can all be meshed together. So thanks again for watching this. If you haven't subscribed or liked the video, you can do that. It's always appreciated. I guess it means a lot to YouTube algorithms. And appreciate all the Dark Sword patrons and the Army Painter patrons too, because you get to see these. Any support that's on the Patreon page, well, basically goes into the videos because we're constantly needing supplies and equipment. So thanks again, and I'll catch you on episode 10.